Welcome to Category Visionaries, the show dedicated to exploring exciting visions for the future from the founders who are on the front lines building it. In each episode, we'll speak with a visionary founder who's building a new category or reimagining an existing one. We'll learn about the problem they solve, how their technology works, and unpack their vision for the future. I'm your host, Brett Stapper, CEO of Frontlines Media. Now let's dive right into today's episode. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Category Visionaries. Today we're speaking with Marty Ringlein, CEO and co-founder of Agree.com, an agreements platform that's raised $3 million in funding. Marty, what's up, man?
Hey man, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Super excited. So let's start with the big question. Agree.com, you have it on your hat. How'd you get the domain?
Yeah, so it was always called Agree. We always felt like that was the word we wanted to anchor around. And one day we're fundraising for the pre-seed, the $3 million you alluded to. And at the end of one of the calls, we always kind of like me and my co-founder Will do like a quick debrief. And this investor had mistakenly referred to the company as Agree.com. And we got at the end of that call, we're like, okay, what if this is a pattern where this becomes problematic? And Will says to me, have you gone to Agree.com? Like, what's there? I'm like, no, as an idiot, never even thought to go to it. It seems like such an obvious thing. So like we're on the Zoom together. We literally both just type in Agree.com. And it's this website that, you go to the footer and it says copyright 2018. So it hasn't had some love in a bit. So I'm thinking, okay, it's not actively being used. It might be up for sale. I've bought a few domains in the past. So I actually own Marty.com. So I love a good 5-letter.com. But I know enough to know that there's a privacy policy on that website. And I know that in a privacy policy, there's a legal entity. So I go, I find it. I find that LLC. I go to LinkedIn. There's a company. It's got one employee, the president and CEO. I find that guy. I slide into his DMs. And I know enough on like, if he owns this domain, like I know how to play this game where you can't offer this dude $500. You're just never going to hear from him again. He's going to block you, right? So you've got to offer him something that's pretty darn close to what it's worth. And then obviously we all want to pay less than it's worth. So you got to offer just a little bit less than that, right? Like that's the game. And it worked out perfectly. He wrote back. He said, no, but you're close enough. I'll take the call with you. And then it was a 4-month sort of like romantic wine and dine to get him over the edge. Because he didn't really need to sell it. He's done well for himself in his career. He's kind of a higher net worth person. So like the money that we ended up paying, it's not really moving the needle for him, but like he got really excited. I had to switch my sales tactic. It wasn't about money now. It was about, hey, what if you're a part of this really awesome, amazing thing we're building? What if you're a part of that origin story? When we do interviews like this, and it's the very first question, you're going to be a part of that story for all the way up through the IPO. They're still going to ask us how we got that darn.com, and you're still going to be. And I think he genuinely was just like this. I love you guys. I love what you're doing. Like, I do want to be a part of this. And that's where I think eventually tides turn.
That's so smart. I feel like everyone will just typically go into it, like a lawyer, right? And say, go throw some money at them, see if money can move the needle. Very smart to take a creative approach and a different approach there.
Oh, yeah. The entities down in South Florida, I even pulled the like, hey, I'm actually going to be in Miami next week if you want to get together. If he says yes, I go to United to book a flight. I just happen to be in town. You never know how to read some people. Like, you just got to get a beer. You got to go face to face. And so if that's what it took to get this over the line, man, I'll go to Miami for the weekend. I'm done with that.
What about Marty.com? I don't want to spend all episode talking about domains, but how can I not ask about that? Was it similar?
Yeah. That one was actually much cheaper. I mean, 5-letter realword.coms are expensive. I think it was somewhere between 12 or 18 grand, which, again, is a lot of money, but it's just sold my first startup to Twitter. So I got some disposable income. I'm young. I'm like 31. I'm, stupid with it. I got to buy a nice watch, fancy places, everything. I got to buy a cool domain name. And I just thought like, hey, it'd be so cool to be Marty.com. I bought like lesser expensive domains. So I knew a little bit of the game, but same thing, just reached out to the dude, knew kind of how to play it. And that one was a little bit faster, but he was game.
What was that first company that you sold? And was that your first like taste of real financial freedom and financial success?
Yeah. Because I'm a lower end middle-class kid growing up. My dad's Navy. And this is the first time where like, I think anyone in any of my family, like related family has any kind of like, multiple commas in a bank account sitting somewhere just like overnight. And so it's called Include. It starts as a design agency, just two dudes making websites for people. But this is in 2006, going to 2007. And we're nerds about how to not only design, but build like amazing websites. And they have to be built the right way. We're just very strict about this. And it turns out that right way, which is highly debatable at the time, is the only way that you could build in what's to come a mobile revolution. So a year and a half later comes around and this little iPhone releases. There's like, I don't know, maybe 10,000 people on the planet that know how to build for mobile. And we just happen to be in that small, tiny cohort, of 7 billion people. And that little agency turned into a software company. Our biggest client ended up becoming Apple. So we're doing multiple millions of dollars a year with them. They made an acquisition offer. And then I didn't know anything about Silicon Valley. All our customers ended up becoming Silicon Valley customers, but we were based in DC. But the M&A world's small. One person starts talking M&A that everyone knows about the deal. And so Twitter reached out and they were like, hey, we want, I was like, yeah, I loved Twitter back then. This is 2011, so early days of Twitter. But I was just like, yeah, man, Apple's a dream, but like Twitter's awesome. Like Twitter's just a baby company. And, it's about to IPO in the next couple of years. So like to join early, it wasn't mobile yet. This is the early days Twitter. So it's 140 characters, no photos, no video. They don't even have their own app yet. Like it is early days. And so to be a part of that mobile revolution and then like take them through IPO, like that just seemed like a story that's like once in a lifetime opportunity. So we had to do it.
That connects some dots. On your LinkedIn, I saw your favorite letters were what? R&D, M&A, IPO. So I think we've covered two of those. R&D, what's the story behind R&D?
Well, just that like we've been lucky. And whenever I kind of tell the story and, go through 4 or 5 of these different startups and exits, there's a pattern where, we're not geniuses or fortune tellers, but we're like 1.5 to 2 steps ahead of everybody else. Clearly Steve Jobs is seeing a mobile world that none of us are seeing. But like we're dabbling in a world that everyone else thinks is stupid. I remember I met the CPO at USA Today back in 2006, and I get to ask a question. I'm like 29. I raised my hand. Or I would have been 24 in 2006. And I asked him about this new way to make websites using specifically CSS and JavaScript. And he was just like, no, it's like, that's the stupidest thing you could do. And he's like, and I asked him specifically about mobile. And he's like, no, just look at the data. It's a data answer. He says, it's like less than 1% of our users are reading USA Today on a mobile device. And so like, why would we build for that? And I'm just thinking, I'm like, okay, he has to be smarter than me. This is the very first time in my entire career I'm thinking like, I should question the authority. Because I'm like, but I'm thinking, well, that's because these are shitty devices with shitty connectivity. What would happen if there was theoretically a better device and we had stronger connectivity? Wouldn't more users? I mean, that's obvious now. And yes, obvious. But in 2006, I think it's probably a 50-50 coin flip of whether that's a stupid question or a smart question. I just go with, let's go counter. Let's just go the way that everyone's not going. And it turned out that thank God for Steve Jobs and the iPhone, the revolution came. So we've always been 1 or 2 steps ahead, even with this new business agree. And so, that just includes, that just means R&D, right? Like you're doing research and development, you're doing it in an area where there's no consumer, there's no way to monetize. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. No one's there. And the question is like, why build in a place where no one's there? Because there must be a reason no one's there. But there's 2 reasons, right? There's no point in going after it, or it's untapped and it's coming, right? If you get lucky enough that you tap into the untapped and it's coming, like huge opportunity. And we've just been like so far greater than a coin toss, like almost every time. Again, not fortune tellers, just we follow the technology.
I feel like we could spend this whole episode talking about your past, your investing you've done, everything you've built, but I know we want to really focus here on Agree. So let's jump right in. So I think we probably have a little bit of context around Agree. Let's go back to that investment meeting or that pitch that you were making. Like, what were you pitching when you were pitching Agree?
Yeah, so this is actually kind of a fun one. I'll do a quick little setup. We knew the problem existed and it was a pain point for us. And we knew as product folks how we would solve it. So like all of this is conceptually in our heads. I'm starting to think through, me and Will, my co-founder, are starting to think through taking this to market. And coincidentally, I just moved to New York and there's a guy here named Simon who's pretty big in the New York ecosystem for entrepreneurs. And he's an investor. And he just said, hey, Marty, heard you're new to the scene. I'd just love to get you coffee. I was like, hey, man, I'm new to New York. I'd love to get coffee with you. So he picks a coffee shop near Grand Central and 45 minutes is on the calendar block, right? So I assume I got 45. Now we're 40 minutes into just shooting the shit, right? Just making a bud. And at the end, I got 5 minutes left. I just like, hey, I've got this kind of crazy idea. I'd love to get your feedback on it. And he's like, hey, Marty, I love crazy. And so I will pitch. I tell him about Agree, right? I'm not meant to pitch. But in 5 minutes, he's just like, basically says, Marty, I'm in. And I was like, I don't know what that means. I'm in. He's like, oh, I want to invest in it. I was like, oh, all right, I guess we're doing that. And I immediately get on my AirPods, leave the coffee shop, call Will, say, hey, we're building this, we're investing. So we put together a pitch deck because we'd already had, now it's just the formality. Like it's all there conceptually. We have a small fund ourselves, $10 million fund that we invest out of. So we have a few investor friends. So I just start pinging the friends to say, hey, gonna go to market with this. Like what I'm asking for, like if you want to throw in, like that's awesome, but just talk me off the ledge. Like tell me this is a really dumb, big waste of my time. Like as a friend, like just stop me from wasting my time. And every call is just like, we're in. It's like, wow, So it was 3 weeks from Simon to close and that was $3 million, 3 weeks. It's like, wow, it's definitely, we're not product market fit, but that's investor market fit. So like, let's go to town with this thing.
And that idea that you were pitching, is it exactly what the product looks like today? Has it evolved since then? Or is that like spot on and nailed how to articulate the problem in the product?
It is almost exactly spot on because Will and I wrote up a one-pager that we call the vision. It's publicly online, so I've tweeted it many times. And I reread it, I don't know, once a month. And it's like not a paragraph to change, not a sentence to change, no hyphens or semi. It is just still spot on. That probably won't be true in 10 years that we do ring that bell. Like it'll probably have evolved quite a bit from then. But over the last 12 months, like it's still held strong. But the way that we articulate it gets fancier with every pitch. Because for any founders that are out there listening, everyone always says you have to do 100 pitches to get to a yes. You get 100 no's to get to a yes. I don't believe that's true. I think you just have to practice the pitch 100 times. And then you get really good at knowing how to talk about it. And now we're there. Because I've heard every version of every question that somebody could ask about this and every hole that they could poke. And there's a couple times where someone asks me a question and I'm deer in the headlights like, wow, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. And so I blew that one, but I'll never blow that question again because I won't be able to sleep for the next 3 nights until I've mastered the answer to that question.
This show is brought to you by Frontlines Media, a podcast production studio that helps B2B founders launch, manage, and grow their own podcast. Now, if you're a founder, you may be thinking, I don't have time to host a podcast. I've got a company to build. Well, that's exactly what we built our service to do. You show up and host, and we handle literally everything else. To set up a call to discuss launching your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. Now, back to today's episode.
So good. So good. When you were starting then, did you view DocuSign like this is the big competitor we need to go after, take business from them? Is it other competitors? Like, how did you think about the competitive landscape at the time?
Yeah, so the DocuSign's a fun one. If this were a pitch with an investor, as soon as DocuSign comes up, my classic line is, oh, this is the last time we'll ever talk about DocuSign. And they're like, oh, what does that mean? What's he got under there? But DocuSign's fun for a few reasons. One, it's 22 years old. Everyone kind of hates it, but they don't know why. It's what we call a villain brand. So Microsoft Teams, Jira, the IRS, Ticketmaster, like when you just say their names, you're just like visceral reaction. And so DocuSign, they just happen to be in that camp, unfortunately for me. So, I think every founder has a mountain to climb. And then we've all got a boulder that we got to push up that mountain. And some of ours are bigger and heavier than others. Mine's a little bit lighter because I go up against DocuSign. And in fact, it doesn't even matter what I'm selling. I just say, hey, raise your hand if you hate DocuSign. They're like, we're in. We're going to buy whatever it is you've got. I don't even care what it is. I hate DocuSign. So they're a fun one to pick on. And I came to this realization when there was a conference here in New York and a buddy of mine was running it. And he said, Marty, I will gift you 1 minute. You get to go on stage, you get 500 people. We haven't even launched yet. He said, but you get 1 minute. I'm like, okay, this isn't a pitch. These aren't investors. These are potential customers, but I haven't even launched it. What do I say in 1 minute? And he tells me this, a few hours beforehand. So I'm just thinking through. I get on stage. I do the Will Ferrell thing where I completely black out. And then I just say, I get on stage and I'm just like, today is the last day you'll ever pay for DocuSign. And the crowd erupts. Like they are cheering. People standing. And I know I'm not dreaming because Will was in the audience and he's like, dude, there was a standing ovation for that. So from that point forward, we're like, okay, I don't love calling out another company by name from like a marketing perspective, but like with this particular brand, it plays so well. So we lean into it a lot. There's also something really nice in that, like with agree.com, we're able to sell is more, not just like the upstart that's like cheaper than DocuSign, but actually the DocuSign. So that's been helpful as well. But this is not a DocuSign play. Our whole take is that what their product, what they sell is a commodity, e-signature, like nobody should pay for it. If we give it away for free, we can do other cool things on the fin side. So this is really about money movement. This is really about the fact that after most signatures, somebody has to pay somebody money. And we just want to make sure that we've connected the e-signature to the money movement part. So with Indian payment processing as well.
I always see people on LinkedIn just kind of talking trash about them in terms of their positioning. So, the recent iteration of intelligent agreement management, like where does this stuff come from? Do people actually buy based on that? Or is it they've read Play Bigger and they're just trying to do category creation?
I think you have to say AI. You have to have an answer to AI. This is one of those ones where they're so big now that there's a disconnect between the marketing messaging that's needed to like land with the consumer and the marketing message that's needed to make like the board of directors happy. Do you know that there was a board meeting? Because there's a new CEO. So that means the old CEO didn't leave willingly. So when the new CEO comes, like the only thing anyone wants to talk about between 21 and 25 is like, what are you doing with AI? And so he has an answer. And then they can't not go all in on that answer, whether the consumer or the customer wants it or not. So to me, like that marketing message is for a board of directors, not for a customer. But yeah, Doc, you're saying like they're a weird one. Their stock's up, but like business is sometimes good, sometimes bad. It's kind of cyclical on the market. And like, but they just announced today a big round of layoffs. I think it's like another like 500 folks or something. Sales, mostly sales and marketing.
Deepening their position as what'd you call it? A villain brand. I love that.
Yeah.
Where did you come up with that? Is that something you came up with? Is there someone you followed that talks about this? Like,
No,
bring us
it
to
was
your
after-
views around branding.
Yeah, after that conference, I was just like, I have to know like analytically or even like quantitatively, like why. I love that they cheered. I love that DocuSign sucks, but like why? So I got to get into it. I got to really understand. And then I started just thinking like, oh, there are some brands where if I just said their names, there would be visceral reactions. And then we just kind of coined it ourselves and said villain brand. It's like we kind of villainize them. We've always kind of done it without knowing. I just didn't do it from a market. I do it in a pitch deck, like privately and confidentially. So like we built a company that eventually got acquired by Eventbrite. But that first pitch deck, it says very clearly Eventbrite sucks. And then I walk through why it sucks and then like why ours is better. But I do like from a marketing perspective, for an upstart new entrant into a market, I do think anchoring is really important. So if I say I'm a better DocuSign, I don't really have to explain what I am because you already have context into what DocuSign is. So I've just saved myself like 5 to 12 minutes. And then I just have to quickly explain what better means. And so that's easier, right? And those are all just positive attributes. I don't have to talk about like the product functionality, which is kind of a snooze fest. And so I do think anchoring, and then you see this like in investment decks all the time. We're an Uber for, or, Airbnb for. And so people, anchoring is a classic thing, but I think here it plays well because I'm anchoring against something that already has a visceral reaction. As opposed to like
Makes a
Uber,
lot of
like I
sense.
love Uber. My instinct is like, no, you're not an Uber for anything. Like you're not even close to an Uber. I have a positive association, maybe not with Uber, the brand, but with Uber, the business.
I mean, you nailed it earlier with your examples too, like Teams. Whenever I have to go on a Teams meeting, I'm like, it's going to crash a few times. It's never going to work. Like the whole experience is just going to be annoying. So I think you've nailed it with the villain brand. I love that concept. What else in terms of marketing? If we really kind of zoom out and think about your marketing philosophy, your marketing approach outside of anchoring and villain brands, what does your general marketing philosophy look like?
Yeah. So, again, if you're in the startup entrepreneurial world, there's a big thing going around. It's dying down a little bit, but over the last 4 or 5 months, founder mode is big now. And so it's all about founder mode versus marketing mode. We love this concept that we call guerrilla mode, which is, guerrilla marketing. And I really do think that I want to agree 10 years from now, bringing that bell, big part of our marketing spend is still going to be guerrilla. I think my CMO 10 years from now, they're going to be really constrained by the budget. I want them to be creative and nimble because I think in that one, I'm an upstart, right? I've just raised 3 million. We're about to close our seed round. We'll have a little bit more capital, but like, I shouldn't be spending millions of dollars on marketing. I shouldn't have billboards in Times Square. I have to be fiscally responsible with that spend, but that constraint is like a creative fuel, right? And so what I need to do, my fundamental belief is I need to look at the noise that I have to go up against. So you and I just talked about prior to this SaaStr, right? We're going to go do a big launch at SaaStr this year. So we'll be there for anyone that's around, but it's going to be noisy. A lot of people selling a lot of stuff. DocuSign will be there. Bill.com will be there. But if you kind of squint, they all look the same. They all have the same booth. They all have the same, 4 white dudes wearing a polo shirt with the little logo. And they've got like, they get out of yeah, right? It's like, it's like, that's fine. But like, just don't do that. Like do something that's not that so you get some attention. So like, what is that? Like, what is the one thing you could do? And then what's the way you could do that in the most like scrappiest economical way possible? And then do something that gets some laughs or some attention. So like with SaaS or even FinTech Meetup, we're going to go do big in a couple of weeks. My goal is you need to go through the convention hall and not say, oh, did you hear Agree's here? Did you hear, oh, they're giving away e-signature for free? Nobody, shit, that's not cool. I need them to say, hey, did you hear about the blank booth? Right? I need people talking about it. And I don't know what that, I could have puppies at that booth. They'd be like, oh, did you hear there's puppies? Like, and people do that. You've been to that booth or like, oh, did you hear the one where they're printing faces on cookies? But now, you're like, yeah, I've seen the puppy booth. So it's played out. So you can't do puppies. Yeah, it works. But like, we've all seen the puppy thing and like the faces on cookies, we've seen it. The one where like you go to a booth and like they take your LinkedIn portrait, like we've seen it, like they're just boring now. So that same spirit, but the thing they haven't seen before. So with FinTech Meetup, what we're going to do, because I'm being cost conscious here, is I'm just going to turn the booth isn't an Agree booth. It is a s'mores making station. And we're going to make s'mores. We're going to hand out, in our swag will be, the whole thing, graham cracker, marshmallow, and chocolate, right? And the giveaways with branded stuff on it. But the whole campaign, we are all about money movement and helping sales teams recognize revenue faster. It's all about s'more revenue, right? And so like super cute about it. So then I want people wondering, hey, did you see they're giving out s'mores? You think there's s'mores down there? Hey, maybe it doesn't work. Maybe everyone hates it, but guaranteed never been to a conference where there's like a whole s'mores booth. They're like, we're doing like, your little booth, like the whole top's going to be AstroTurf. I found a battery powered little like campsite thing. So it looks like there's a fire going on. I've got like a log cabin, like, thing around the table. I'm going all out on this thing. And so it'll stand out. The hard job is I have to connect the dots now of like, okay, marshmallows and graham crackers to e-signature. And the s'more revenue is my little bridge.
Makes sense. I think it's such an important lesson for founders to hear that, like, you're having fun, right? Like a lot of the B2B marketing I see, it's just boring. It's exactly what you just talked about there, where like it's a small startup, but it looks like Bill.com. It looks like DocuSign. For Bill.com, DocuSign, it kind of makes sense. You are somewhat limited. You're big. You're a public company. There's only so much you could do. But when there's like an early stage startup, I'm talking with them and they're like, I don't know. That's too risky for a brand. I'm like, what fucking brand? Like, you don't have a brand. No one knows you. Like, that's your risk because no one knows you.
Yeah, zero risk here. We went to Dreamforce, so that we sell mostly to sales teams. Like, there's 150,000 of my customers at a 3-block radius for 2 days. Why would I not be there? And so I can't afford to sponsor sales with Dreamforce. So what do? I was like, all right, what do people there want? Right? They're exhausted. It's all like coffee. Even the coffee lines that are free are so long. You pay for coffee at a Starbucks. Why don't we just give out coffee? And that's something where we can do it outside. We can go to different blocks and we'll get a coffee cart. And I just found a group in Canada that does a full vinyl wrap, full branding of it. And we thought, let's give away bags of coffee too. And hey, we do e-signature. Let's call it our signature blend. Like, super cute. We'll do custom bags. We'll design the whole thing. And this worked out really well for us because 2 things happened. One, inside of Dreamforce, they ran out of coffee. So it was only decaf left. So people are a little pissed. And the Starbucks on the corner of Moscone Center in San Francisco, it got so overrun because everyone's doing mobile orders and everyone's pissed because now your mobile order takes 30 minutes. So it's bad when it took 5 minutes, but now it takes 30. The manager of the Starbucks quits on the spot. The whole Starbucks is in chaos. The local news comes down. Who's right out in front handing out orders? These guys. And that Starbucks now in Moscone shut down. It's shut down because of what happened there. Yeah. But it's like just, I'm looking around, like I got a line down the block, wanted to meet agree.com. But like, there's not one other founder out here. There's nobody like doing, where they sell like mattresses, like spitting. Nobody handing out 4x6 postcards. Like just show up, man. Like even if you don't have a creative like bone in your body, like go to a Kinko's, print some 8.5x11 and just be there. And I'm just shocked at how many people don't even show up.
What I find really interesting about what you're saying is it's almost like you come up with the idea first, and then after the idea is done, you come up with a way to tie it back to the brand. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Like the signature came later, right?
That's my whole life, man. We always say idea first, or sometimes we'll say domain first. Like, that's a really great domain name. What would you build around it? But yeah, it's almost always that way. And because we have to I think we have to sell ourselves onto it. And I'm always like, because Will's a little bit more fiscally responsible than I am. So I know if I got to create like the s'mores thing, like if I tell him, hey, I'm going to go spend a bunch of money on like s'mores, he's just going to be like, dude, I have to design up the whole concept first. And I pitch it to him. And then he's like, oh, this is good. And when I know he's in love with it, then I know just like any audience member that walks into that convention center is going to be like, okay, clever, right? And I just want clever points. Because then you're like, all right, I want to talk to these guys. I want to go to their after party, or I want to, do their demo. I like these guys.
This show is brought to you by the Global Talent Co., a marketing leader's best friend in these times of budget cuts and efficient growth. We help marketing leaders find, hire, vet, and manage amazing marketing talent for 50 to 70% less than their U.S. and European counterparts. To book a free consultation, visit globaltalent.co.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value, and it's always hard to articulate it, of just doing something cool. Like I've seen that be able to like define a brand. So there's a company I worked with years ago. They did one very interesting stunt with some fake protesters. To this day, people talk about that. They just did it one time many, many years ago, and like they're cool in everyone's eyes. So I think it's almost understated how impactful like one big creative idea can be. Like it can really define the brand, so to speak.
And I think like anybody like who's looking at like the go-to-market side, especially when you're trying to be like fiscally responsible early on, I think you just have to always have your eyes open and be ready to jump on any opportunity. Because sometimes these things, especially if you want to keep costs down, it's like a last second decision. At my very first company, two dudes making websites, right? And no one had ever heard of us, but I want the world, if you need a website, I want you to call these two guys. I want it to be synonymous with great websites. We're at South by Southwest and this gentleman's throwing a bowling event. Now, everybody and anybody in the agency world is going to go to this event. Like everyone we look up to is going, this is the big event. They're all excited. This guy's got like 4 buses. It's going to take us all to the bowling thing. Like this is a big deal. Day before, he sends out an email. Hey, sponsor didn't come through. Can't afford the buses. We're canceling. I'm in the Hampton Inn where a lot of my folks were staying, and I hear everyone like grumbling, and everyone's at the happy hour like, oh, they canceled. They can't. Everyone's upset. I'm just thinking, wait a second. Because of the buses? I'm like, how much could a freaking bus cost? So I just called the dude, Brian, and I was like, hey, quick question. Honestly, is it just because of buses? Like, how much are buses? He's like, yeah, $1,600. I was like, I will give you $1,600. And just my big ask is when you email everyone saying it's back on, can you say thanks to include? And so, he had a bunch of like gold sponsors doing everything else. And so I come in as the cheapest sponsor ever, but I'm the savior, right? No one knows any of the other sponsors. Everyone knows me. Everyone's thanking me. I go to the Hampton Inn's lobby and I'm like, hey, do you have a color printer? They print out my logo on an 8.5 by 11. I get a tabletop at the bowling alley and I tell the guy like, hey, give me like 10 large pizzas and just keep them coming to this table. So it's like, my little logo. People are just coming for the pizza and they're just like, oh yeah, you guys, thank you. Like, I think we were a bigger hit than the event because we saved the day, but like, you have to be able to like move so quick.
That's the biggest thing that I've seen with this type of stuff is like speed is everything. And I think that's one of the reasons the big companies can't do it is like, you're talking like sometimes 12 hours, 5 hours. In your case, it was what? 10 minutes, really immediately. I think that's like the ultimate advantage that founders have and early stage startups have is like they can move fast. The founder can say yes. It doesn't have to go through all these steps, all this approval.
To pull it off, I had to call the bus company and give them my credit card. Can't go through, there's just no time, right? Like that's never, you work at DocuSign, you ain't getting that $1,600.
100%. Now, what about Category? So when I did the intro, I introed you as the agreements platform. Is that the Category customers are buying? Is that for the board? How are you thinking about this?
Yeah, so it's complicated, right? I'll talk about like how we actually sell and then the actual dynamics of business and how it works. The category is actually fintech, right? We're all about money movement. It's all about invoicing and payments. We are a payments facilitator. If anything, our competition isn't DocuSign. It's Stripe invoicing and Stripe billing. It's also Bill.com. Anybody that does invoicing and payment processing. But that's not how I sell the product. I sell the product of like to anchor against DocuSign. Hey, are you paying for DocuSign now? Do you think you shouldn't pay for DocuSign now? I've got a better, cheaper, and there's nothing more cheaper than free. It's a better version of DocuSign and it costs nothing. So just come on. No caps, no fees, no limitations, like no tricks, just 100% free e-signature. I can get all the sales teams in the world to be like, oh yeah, I hate DocuSign and it's free. I don't have to get any approval from my boss to use this. I can just start using this myself. So that's my hook to get into the company. So, and what I secretly want, the secret juice here is I give the e-signature away for free, right? So DocuSign's entire product category, totally for free. So I got to make money somewhere. It's not on selling the data, which is where most people's heads go to. I'm not putting ads in your contracts, but I want the data. The data is valuable to me. So when you put your contract in and you send it for signature, I will take all contracts, NDAs and LOIs, whatever it is. But what I really want are sales teams sending sales contracts. Because what's really unique about a sales contract against any other legal document, it contains payment information. Who pays who, net 45, net 60, payment stipulations, payment scheduling, if there's a deposit, if there's an escrow. These are variables. And it's every single variable you need to generate an invoice. So if I own the contract, I can programmatically generate an invoice, which makes the finances team a lot easier. Because right now what happens is you take an executed DocuSign, you slack it over to a finance team, they physically open a PDF and they physically type in everything from that into their invoice purchasing. It slows down deal velocity, slows down CUPS revenue, recognizing revenue. So like it slows down everything that's meaningful to the business. And then there's human error, right? Like it's $33,000 and you type in $3,300. Like that's not good. And this happens all the time. And then there's no follow-up. It's like that accounts receivable automation. It's just like reminding you that your payment's due net 45. And there's no insights. Like everyone loves DocSend because you can send a pitch deck around and you see who opened it, how much time they spent on it. That doesn't exist for payments. I can't see when my customer was emailed the invoice. More importantly, when did they open it, right? Is it stuck in spam, right? How long did they sit there and look at it, right? And then what I really want to know, they're going to pay, let's just say my ticket size is over $10,000. They're not paying credit card. They're going to pay ACH. Takes 3 to 5 days, right? So I don't know. Revenue is in limbo. When it's ACH, nobody knows where the revenue is. What I want to know is, when was the ACH started? When was it cleared? When was it processed? And as a salesperson, I want to know when it hits my company's bank account. No salesperson in the world has access to that information, right? You have to wait till the end of the month when you get like your commission check to know if your customer actually paid. So that's all the values on the finance team. But I don't enter through finance. I enter through sales. I make them fall in love with me, give that whole thing away for free. And then I say, hey, after you've sent enough signatures, why don't we send you first in? And then what I do is I expand the use of a sales team into the finance organization as opposed to selling in the finance directly, which becomes a little harder to rip out an invoicing or purchase order software, because it's never that it sucks. It's just that like it doesn't not work is the way you would describe a lot of these systems. Like it functions, it does what it's supposed to do. Sure, it could be better, but like I don't have the time or bandwidth, mess around with 5 or 6 different vendors. But it's like, oh yeah, we're just, accelerating the use of the sales team that we already use, and it makes everything better. Like that's an easier conversation.
How do you navigate getting around just like the status quo? So I would imagine that there's probably some people, especially I would envision them on kind of the finance side, where they've just used DocuSign forever. They've used Bill.com forever. How do you convince them to switch to Agree.com?
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 answers to this question. One, if you've just been on DocuSign since the beginning for 22 years, and it's what you know, and you're a person of comfort, it's just not a good fit. Like, there's just no point in me wasting my time to convince you, because it just takes me an hour. I can convince somebody else in 10 minutes. I'd rather get 6 of them than 1 of you. So it's better for me to go get somebody else. So either people that don't have that comfort sort of attachment, or net new customer, right? It's just standing up. A sales team that's just growing. They need to just
building the tech stack.
Yeah. So that first part, that'll become a problem for me at scale, right? Once I've already dominated my little early market and said, okay, now I need to go and steal customers from DocuSign, like at least archaic ones. And then the other one is like, it kind of plays to my benefit. If you've been using DocuSign for 10 years, like I don't have to explain to you what's broken. I don't have to walk through to you all these steps. And it's really funny. Whenever we have to work with a vendor to buy something, they usually have a sales team. And I talk to the sales team. And on the call where they're pitching me, I'm like, hey, I'm in, guys. Let's do it. $27,000 approved. I was like, hey, what's the process? You're going to send me like a DocuSign to sign? And they're like, oh, yeah. I was like, hey, if you don't mind, we can send it on Agree. They're like, oh, of course. Because they want to close the deal. They don't care. But I'm like, so what happens next? Like somebody from finance, they walk me through the whole thing. They're exhausted. And then once it clicks for them, they're like, oh, this is what you guys do. And I'm like, yeah. They're like, we should connect you with our COO. Usually I found is the person who owns contracts.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I would love that introduction. That would be great. So the reverse pitch is real, but I get them to realize, and I get them to connect the dots.
I know we talked about earlier, like the vision hasn't changed since those early ideas or early meetings that you had. What about that go-to-market motion? Like day one, did you know we're going to sell this via sales? Like, did you know that's how you were going to enter the org?
No, that evolved a lot. Some of it evolved during the pitching too, where it's like, what's your monetization strategy? What's your distribution strategy? And there's just so many people that sign so many things. The question was, commercial real estate's a big one, right? Well, that's probably the biggest one where you sign and big amounts of money move. But like, it's hard to break into that market. It's not impossible. People do it all the time, but it's a distraction. So we thought of all the places we could penetrate. What's the one where the pain was the biggest and the entry was the easiest? And B2B SaaS sales team is kind of where we found when we just started talking to them, the conversations just moved much quicker, much faster. Because in the beginning, we talked to everyone. I talked to real estate agents. I talked to them on the residential side, the commercial side. I talked to founders doing fundraising, also signatures and money move, and independent landlords where they own 1 or 2 or 3 units, small businesses, accountants, tax brokers, and it just B2B SaaS sales teams. They were the hungriest for it. They also were the ones that are allowed to go rogue the most, where their boss kind of doesn't care what they do as long as they close more deals faster. And so they're allowed to like, dude, we have a 6-year DocuSign contract, but like nobody cares. I'll use Agree and it doesn't matter. As long as the deal got closed, like they'll get their like hand slap, but like the boss is like, I just had to do that technically. Like keep closing more deals.
Yeah.
Agree's what you need to do. And it's why like I also love like junior salespeople, because like kind of easy to like, convince to come over because they like using you. They're younger. They kind of hate DocuSign just for archaic reasons. They want a more modern tool set. But then once they love it, they just tell the other 6 folks that they work with who are juniors. And then once that happens, I just call the CRO. I'm like, hey, man, like half your team's using this thing. Why don't we just make it official? It's free. Like, what's the hang up? And he's usually like, what, free? How? And then once I get him over that, that's the biggest reason not to use Agree for folks is because like it's free, like, which is so fun.
Weird, right?
Like,
Yeah.
yeah. But I get it because like they're smart enough to know I have to make money some way. So then it's like, what's the hook? What are you doing? Where's my data? And in an AI world, it's like everyone's nervous about like who owns that data, where it goes, how proprietary. So once we explain to them like, oh, well, one day if your finance team decides to use it, they don't have to. And the CRO is just like, oh yeah, they'll never use it. They always say that they'll never use it. We're just going to use these things. I was like, that's fine. That's what they all say. But eventually they'll use it.
I love it. I'm seeing now that we're way over on time here. So we're going to have to wrap before we do. And by the way, we're going to have to bring you on for a part 2. I feel like there's so much more that we could discuss. Maybe we could do it at SaaStr, eat some s'mores together. Final question though, like,
let's do it live one.
Let's do it. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Let's zoom out here. So what's the big picture vision? What does it look like? You can go 3 years out, 5 years out, 10 years out. What's the big picture vision?
Yeah. So again, at the end of almost every signature, someone has to pay someone money. Every time that happens, like we want to own that. And we're going to start with is any company that moves the majority of their revenue through a contract, right? We want to own the contract and we want to own that money movement. Like that is the business that we're building here. And so, the next 3 years, it's the mid-market. Anyone that does between like 1 and 50 million in revenue annually, that has a sales team anywhere between like 2 to 25 folks. We want all of them using the product. That's the core focus. Beyond that, we're going to start to come for some of DocuSign's core business. 25% of it is real estate. So that's another like obvious place to go. And then we're talking like what happens when you do bigger ticket items? Founders, right? We just raised a big seed round. Like what happens? People have to sign docs and then people have to wire money. We want to own that whole thing. Obviously, we do our own round on our own product, but you monetize those things differently. So as the scale grows and the customer base grows, the way in which you can make money expands. So our monetization opportunities open up. So we go from this e-signature to like this invoicing billing tool to like what happens when you are doing escrow. Another 20-plus-year-old archaic business that no one's come for. Like no one's really come for DocuSign in a while. Like Paradox was the last player 13 years ago. So escrow.com, someone needs to come to them. We own the contract. I know the escrow term. I can hold money like a bank, so I can do escrow. The other one would be invoice factoring. I know more information about a business than anybody else because I know your open close rate on the sales side, but I also know the invoicing side, who pays late, who pays on time, how often they do, by which category segmentation of customer. That's the historicals. I know every contract out for signature. I know every invoice out for payment. So I can do forecasting on revenue and I can do underwriting on all of that to start to do invoice factoring for you. So that becomes interesting. And then the last one that we think about is, especially with like a founder raising money. So when we close this, well, we did the pre-seed, right? $3 million. What happens when I have $3 million? I don't go spend it tomorrow. I immediately move it into a treasury account. So I'm getting 5% interest on it, right? I make $10,000 a month on my $3 million. I love that. But if that had gone through Agree and the Agree account by default was high interest yield, you just leave it in Agree. Like, why would you ever create a separate bank account? And that makes a whole lot of sense. So then you start to monetize on the float and like that. So all of these, and then on the yield,
makes a lot of sense. I love the vision. I love this conversation, man. You can hopefully tell I love talking about this stuff. So we'll do another one sometime in the near future. Really appreciate it.
I can't wait to meet up in person, man. Thanks for having me.
Cheers, man.
This episode of Category Visionaries is brought to you by Frontlines Media, Silicon Valley's leading podcast production studio. If you're a B2B founder looking for help launching and growing your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. And for the latest episode, search for Category Visionaries on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.